Good afternoon and welcome to the seminar portion of the Ayer Devens 2033 Symposium being held here at the Ayer Town Hall today and tomorrow. I'm Robert Pomeran, the Ayer Town Manager, and will be facilitating this panel discussion, which we're going to focus on master planning and municipal services impacts with respect to Devens, or the scenario if Ayer was to assume aspects or its historic boundaries of Devens. What would we need to consider? What should we consider? What do we need to study? And I'm joined with some great leaders of the town of Ayer. And I'll start over here with Mr. Nick Lagis, who is the chair of the Ayer Board of Assessors, also an Ayer resident and long-time business owner in the town of Ayer. Nick, welcome.
Thank you.
I have Mr. Jonathan Kranz, the chair of the Ayer Planning Board and Ayer resident. Welcome.
Welcome, and I'm wearing a shirt that I purchased at.
Thank you.
All right, very good.
I admire that shirt.
Good reason for you to.
And over here I have Mr. Scott Hood, the clerk of the Ayer Select Board, also the chair of the town's capital planning committee that oversees a lot of the large capital and infrastructure projects for the town. Also a former finance chair for many, many years, and especially when the first time Vicksburg Square came around, did a lot of work on the potential financial impacts and considerations. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have Janice Livingston, the chair of the Ayer Select Board, also the vice chair of the Devens Jurisdictional Framework Committee that is looking at the issue of disposition and a framework for that, along with Harvard, Shirley, Ayer, the DEC, and Mass Development. So welcome, Janice.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll get right underway, and let's start with, as we look at, and there's so many opinions and ideas and thoughts going back to 1994 to now, and we have another 10 years before 2033, which will go by quickly. From each of you, from your vantage point, what do you see as perhaps the biggest advantage or biggest opportunity or biggest challenge, and you can pick one of each if you want, with respect to Ayer and Devens? And start with Jonathan.
So I think that the largest opportunity is related to the economic growth that Devens represents. And that means that there's opportunity for us, whether or not we even reclaim any portions of it, where we get there or not, that economic growth portion will always be there. And I think that represents an extraordinary opportunity for us. I think in terms of challenges, there are parts of Devens that may be more problematic than they're worth. And that's part of the discussion, why we're starting this discussion now in 2023 rather than waiting for 2033. So I think the consequence of this is that it is wise to start thinking now and not defer it. It's important to be thinking this in the context of our master planning, municipal planning, finances, land use policies, etc. Now's the time. And I was just talking to Alicia earlier, and I agree with her that this is the time when we start building our wish list, that will inevitably be whittled down by realities and practicality. But now's the opportunity to really think big about what we want, not just for ourselves, but the next generation and the generation after that.
All right, good points. Nick.
I think one of the biggest challenges is that Devens is built for Devens. It's not built for the communities. So to try to split that up, it's going to be problematic. There's so many different pieces to it. It's all interconnected, and how do you split it up? But I think 10 years we have a good shot at doing it correctly.
All right. Scott.
I think the biggest opportunity in Devens from our perspective is the space. We're a little over 9 square miles, and we've running out of places to either put things or not even just for building, but for me, Devens really offers open space that we can preserve. We can use for recreational fields, sports fields, and the other opportunity I think would also be a little more bit of self-determination in what's in Devens, in our area of Devens. I'll go back to Ron referenced Vicksburg Square earlier, which was, a super town meeting with all three of the communities. I think there's better opportunity for us as a community to have, some singular jurisdiction over, say a Vicksburg Square, so we could look for possibly, putting in some affordable housing and also kind of, economic growth for our town.
All right. Janice?
So I agree that there are obstacles. I mean, we have pieces of Devens that are still federally owned and controlled and need massive cleanup. And so, one of the things that we would have to do is not only just figure out how do we handle this, but also make sure that we keep the federal government under control and make sure that they realize that, in reality, they're supposed to work for us and this is what we need done. Okay, so, but the opportunities, as he pointed out, open space. I mean, we are. Now, that 9.5 square miles, there's the belief that includes the historical property, which means we're not as big as what we think we are right now. So we would actually be inheriting back what, is actually part of that 9.5 square miles. So the open space is definitely, and in regards to like a situation like Vicksburg Square, about 80% is in the town of Ayer. So how do we chop that up, or can we work out a way through the jurisdiction framework committee, as everybody is working up and then flowing back down, can we work out a deal, for example, with Harvard, like, hey, we need that 20% over here, and it looks like you could use that 20% over here, and can we work out a deal so that we can do this future housing and whatnot? So there's a lot of pieces in play.
Yes, all good points. So let me ask this. So each of you represent key boards and key functions in the town. Obviously, Nick as the chair of the Board of Assessors, really with taxation and issues of tax. Planning Board, Jonathan, tasked with the master plan and overall planning. As I mentioned, we have two of our select board members here as the chief executive body of the town, but also as Scott as on the capital planning committee that looks at long-term plans for capital and infrastructure. And of course, Janice, your involvement on the rate review committee as well as on the framework committee. If we were to look, and I'm going to put this out as a hypothetical because there's been no decisions made. One of the things we've talked about is by 2033 there should be a formal study and formal recommendation to the legislature. And I think everybody would agree we want to do our due diligence on that. So let's just hypothetically, let's assume we were looking at, you hear the phrase taking back, or say we were looking at assuming some of the aspects of Devens. From a municipal point of view, in your experience, what should we be looking at? So we're talking about impact. So what should we be considering? Because nothing is ever easy, and as mentioned, there are costs and so forth. So from your point, if we were to approach, or if you were to approach this Ayer portion of the study, what are some things we should be looking at, maybe not looking at? Just interested in, Scott, we'll start.
I think the biggest question, so back when I was on the finance committee, we were looking at Vicksburg Square. We looked at it as a more of a holistic analysis of what if we were to take that section of land back. And one of the things that resonated with the members of the committee at that time was really kind of what is the trigger where the services that we're providing within our own community, if we expand those out, what's the trigger where we have to hire more firefighters, we have to hire more police officers, DPW employees? What is the domino effect on equipment, whether it's fire apparatus, police cars, more DPW equipment? From an infrastructure perspective, as Nick mentioned, Devens is very self-contained within its current borders. So some of the Utilities would probably remain that same way, but how do you integrate that, those people into our community? So I think that's the biggest challenge for me is, looking at it is what is that sweet spot where the revenue that we have coming in does not outpace the expenses we're going to have going out.
All right. Janice, what should we be looking at or not looking at as we approach to study this issue?
Well, kind of bouncing off a bit as to what Scott was saying. So, like the Devens DPW, if you look at the map, it looks like it's historically in Ayer. Okay? But yet the rest of Devens is connected to that DPW. So, we take it back. How do we deal with, Harvard when they've taken back their part and they're working with what would then be our DPW? So, we did the tour on the bus and everything, which was great and everything. And one of the things I said is we literally got to go down in the weeds and go right down to, how many people do we need to hire to mow the lawn? Okay. Right. So, I mean, it's the simple things, and I'm sure he'll touch on this, but what are they paying to mass development as far as their tax to then integrating them to the town of Ayer, how to do that in case there's a discrepancy, massive discrepancy. How do you do that without, hurting people while still getting them up to where we are? So I think that, that we have to get right into the weeds. We've got to comb through everything. If we think it sounds like, oh, we don't have to worry about that. No, that's probably what we do have to worry about, because that's going to be the item that does get forgotten. So from there, we're going to be building this tree, okay, where you're having this input of, okay, my decision is yes over here, so that let over here, and we've got this big tree, and then take that big tree and then trim it down, and as I used as an example earlier, we've got a beautiful bonsai tree that we all agree on.
All right. It's a good image, Janice. Yeah. All right. Nick, what should we be looking at as we move towards developing a study from Ayer's perspective?
Now, as far as the assessor's point of view, everything has to be valued for tax purposes. So whatever mass development owns will come back to the town as public land, I assume. So there'll be no tax revenue on that. So, and the rest of the property has to be all valued at fair market value. So what are these people going to be paying? Is it going to be fair market value, or are we going to give them all kinds of TIFs? The homeowners up there, is it going to double their taxes? So it's a lot of moving parts.
There is, and as you know, for example, Ayer has the split tax rate, for example, and how does one integrate from the tax structure, say in Devens, if we were to move in that direction towards the Ayer structure?
Absolutely.
Okay. Jonathan, thoughts on what we should be looking at?
So the planning board is responsible for guiding the master plan process and also overseeing the zoning. And so I think there's multiple layers to this. The first, and I think this is going to be a big kickstart tomorrow, is decide what the heck do we want from Devens. And very seriously, is it housing, recreation, open space, environmental protection, whatever those things are. And then from there, this is going to be the hard part, is that each of those will have to undergo a kind of cost-benefit analysis to say, is it really worth it to us? And looking at all the dimensions that all my colleagues here at the table have mentioned, is it worth it? And then from that, saying, which ones do we want to focus on? Then from a planning perspective, it becomes, what does the master plan need to include to have the right goals that match up to what we decide we want from Devens? And then two, do we have the appropriate zoning for this world, for mid-21st century? Because we currently have a zoning that's based on post-World War II suburban development, has different kinds of requirements and not necessarily relevant or even productive now. So as we're looking at Devens, we're also looking at the entire town and what that situation is to prepare us for the future. But so to summarize, I think it's what is it we want and what's the appropriate cost-benefit analysis for it so we can determine, yep, this is where we're going.
All excellent input from all of you on that point. Thank you. Let me ask this. One of the things when the symposium was put together, there are many goals, but two of them were, one, to begin to educate or re-educate, for lack of a better phrase, folks about Devens and Devens issues, because as we all know, it starts in 1994, at least the modern era, and there's a lot of new people in town since then. Things have changed and so forth. And I know that one of the other issues to the town, and it's a challenge, is getting people not just informed but involved. Any thoughts on how we can get more information and involvement from Ayer residents and Ayer businesses towards the issues up at Devens? And we'll open that. Anyone want to?
Yeah, I think the first thing we need to make clear to everyone is that nothing has been written in stone yet.
That's right.
That's the
Yeah.
most important takeaway I'd say to the public, is
point.
that nothing has been determined. And what that means is that everyone has a chance to be heard. Because it isn't set. There is nothing coming from above that says this is the way it has to be. So I would invite people to start thinking about, well, what would they like from Devens? What does Devens currently mean to them if they ever use it for soccer fields? A lot of people, their kids are playing there, et cetera, et cetera. And to think, well, okay, that's that. What do you want to keep, and what else would you like to get? And be part of the deliberative process with your neighbors, thinking about, what does this mean? Everything from the airstrip to the river to all to Vicksburg Square. What do you think about that? Because it hasn't been determined.
Other thoughts? I mean, we're just very interested in the symposium of getting new folks involved and new perspectives. And I'm glad you said, Jonathan, nothing is etched in stone, and everybody has views and opinions and ideas and thoughts, which is great, but none of those are etched in stone. We want to get as much input as we can.
I would say one big important step would be getting the town's Devens analysis, or an equivalent of a Devens analysis committee put together that can start making that punch list of every little nook and cranny that we have to look into, and then start, by collecting the information, figuring out who we need to talk to, what information we need, whether it's different boards, committees, mass development themselves. And then, do report outs to the select board to kind of get that out into the public forum, and invite the public to attend those, and work in tandem with the regional Devens committee that Janice currently serves on, to kind of create this hierarchy of information, from the top down, which Janice sits on, and then from the bottom up, from like that local level committee.
I'm 71 years old. In 10, 15 years, who knows if I'll be here. But
You'll
kids,
still be here, Nick.
kids in high school, those are the kids that are going to benefit from this.
Yeah.
Can we reach out to the schools? I think Alan would be a good man to send up there. He could talk to those kids.
I think all excellent points, and especially starting, and it's always, small steps begin to build into the full staircase, as they say. Some of the points that were brought up, integrating the town's next master plan with
Yes.
a section or a large consideration to this issue.
I want to build on what Nick suggested, because, I hadn't thought of that at all. But once you said it, it occurred to me that this could be an opportunity to teach young people in town about how civic government works. Because I suspect that many people in town, I'm talking to adults as well, have no idea how this works. What happens at town meeting? What do these elected officials do? What is a conservation committee? What does Board of Health do?
Good point. Yeah.
But I think if we actually starting with teenagers is not a bad idea, because they're obviously going to be talking to their parents. And I think it does seem like a really good time to say, hey, there's something, it's not immediate, it's approaching, and engaging people and as not just what do we do about Devens, but as a lesson in that this is how civic government works here in Ayer. This is how our processes work. I think it would dispel a lot of confusion and actually encourage confidence in our town. If people understand that their contribution and commitment matters a great deal.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And I think building off of that, I think one of the tasks conceptually is that, and Janice and I have talked about this a lot and on the framework committee, one is Ayer needs to get its list together, in other words, and that's part of this process. In other words, because on the framework committee, the other entities, the Shirley, Harvard, the DAC Master Development are all at the table. And in Harvard, they have done a lot of effort on the local level to put together sort of their list. So I think that's definitely one of the things that we need to do. To Scott's point is then the analysis of that list, meaning, you know, these are our main priorities. If these priorities were to happen, what are the other considerations, cost, and so forth? And what is, as we're talking about today, the municipal impact? What does that mean, not just financially, but also what does that mean to the character of our town? And I think there's both opportunities and challenges there. I know one of the things, and I appreciate, that's why I asked the question, is we are really trying to get more people involved in this process. And Janice has said several times too that if people hear, well, it's 10 years away. Well, the previous panel, Judge Gardner talked about when he was at the legislature in 1994, when the legislation, and those years went by like that.
Absolutely.
You know, so that was one thing. And the other is that some people hear, oh, I got to get on a committee or what have you. We want to, yes, there's committee opportunities, but also finding more ways like this symposium or discussions like this to just get people talking and what they will be doing tomorrow, some citizen planning and so forth, to get that information out. The key thing is to get people involved.
Well, I think too, if you, first of all, yes, we do need to ask the young people. We do, and we need to go to them and say, look, we're asking for your assistance because, for one, you have the greener ideas. Okay, so that's one of the things. So, you know, you need to just kind of push us aside a little bit and come forward with this idea. You know, but we have to make sure that they feel welcomed and not feel like, you know, they're, let's be honest, a bunch of old fogies ordering them around. Okay? Nobody wants that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want that, okay? But I think too that, when, you know, and we've talked about this a couple of times and mentioned it in an open meeting and whatnot, that, you know, we need to connect to create the Ayer Devens local, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
So that they can do the legwork. And in my opinion, and this is just, you know, a thought, that committee would also be kind of broken up just like we do the master plan committees. Okay? You over here, you're going to work on the environment. You over here are going to work on the cost. You're over here going to work on residential or whatever. All right? And so as they're working on these separate committees, also their interest, their specific interest, that will also feed into the master plan.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yep, for the
And
town.
as they're doing all that work, it's being fed up to the representative, which at the moment is me, to the framework committee, who's
Right.
also having to sit with Harvard and Shirley and Mass Development, the DEC, and the shareholders of the Devens residents and businesses, who are also, you know, a stakeholder in this. This is what we've come up with. And that's where, you know, it could end up even being the negotiation. So, I mean, I could say, okay, Harvard, I want that 20% of Vicksburg Square. What do you want? And, you know, you're going to say, I want where the commissary is to be. Okay? I'm just, you know, we actually have that. But, you know, as an example. And then I'm going to go back to the local committee and say, okay, this is what they're countering. What do you say? So it would be a complete give and take, but we have to have the young people. This is their time to shine. And yes, it is a 10 years away. That is one way of looking at it. But I think I'd like everyone to know is that as you're a part of this process, you're also going to be a part of the history of this. Okay?
Oh, good point.
Here is your time, your chance to put your stamp on it. You know? And that's, you know, some of the things that we've covered. We have obstacles out there. You know, what do? How do we go about this? I don't know. We've come up with a couple ideas. Do you have anything new? You know, but you know, so it's going to be an effort because the young people have also got all sorts of other things they got going on in their life and everything. But this is your chance. This is your chance to be a part of something
That's right.
bigger than you.
If I may?
Yeah.
And I just want to remind people that your elected officials are not experts. That's not what we're about. It's not like we have a special magic expertise. We do not.
It's true.
Except for Nick, right? Except him. That's this guy.
Yeah.
So so if you're thinking about committee, I'm not, I don't have what it takes. Yes, you do, because really we're asking for two things: goodwill, that is a will that you're going to do for the town,
Yeah.
and exercise of good judgment.
Yeah.
Because no matter how finely we write laws, bylaws, regulations, everything in the end comes down to judgment, good, sound judgment, and that's what you can bring to the table is the goodwill and the good judgment and the willingness, as Janice said, to be a part of important history and not let it slide by.
Yeah, and I think, Jonathan, one of the things you and I have talked about as looking at the town's master plan,
Yeah.
the next one that's on the horizon, we don't spend enough time because everybody's so busy and all your boards and committees have all of their work to do plus the unexpected and what have you. And that's one of the things with this symposium, we don't spend enough time just talking about these issues and talking about, okay, if we did this, the folks that have financial expertise, for example, okay, if we did this, what would be the cost impacts? If we did this from a planning point of view, if we did this, from, as you were mentioning earlier, Nick, from a taxation point of view, or any of the other issues, I think as we move forward, and it's hard to do, but if our various boards and committees as well, periodically could segregate a little bit of time in their meetings, and it could be structured to an extent to talk about some of these issues, I think that would help too. And it's hard. Sometimes, being at the select board meeting, sometimes the agenda is packed, sometimes your agenda, but I think as we move forward, finding a little bit of dedicated time to talk about the issues. And I like what was brought up about a master plan sort of for this effort too, not to confuse it with the town's master plan, but maybe if each of you and your respective boards and members, we commit to some type of structure, that would help as well. So all good points. And one of the things I'm always interested in is, because I hear it a lot here at Town Hall, is further with the public education, because there are people that, they assume that Devens is a town, or parts of Devens are already part of Ayer, or what is this 498 disposition study, and I think the more we educate people, that also helps as well. So all excellent points. We're coming up towards the end of our time. It goes by so fast. That's why I brought up the part we should get together again and do this in other forums and other meetings to talk about these issues. Let me ask you this. We'll go around the table. So 10 years from now, which we will go by in the flash of an eye, where would you like to see us coming up on the eve of 2033 with respect to this issue? So if you go by the 498 legislation, there would be a formal recommendation to the state at that time. Where should we be in 2033? Or where would you like to see us in 2033?
I don't know where we should be, but be one word, I think we ought to be prepared.
Prepared.
for what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I would choose the word consensus, that at least by 2033, we have a sense of what the town wants to do. And it may not be what everyone wants, it may be but that it's something saying, this is our collective vision, and we have this, and we know what we want and what we're going to do next.
So we've got prepared, we've got consensus, other thoughts, just where we want to be.
Well, I think Jonathan puts it in a really good framework. The one thing I do want to bring up, though, which I don't think has been brought up today, is also a consensus that also works for the people who live on Devens, too.
Yeah.
There are the town and county boundaries that go through different neighborhoods, and, they need to have a voice in this. It's not like we're playing on a chessboard here. We need to make sure that everyone has a voice in that. It is a good consensus that works for, basically the 4 or 5 parties involved. That does include the Devens residents.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Good points.
Which I agree, I absolutely agree. And yes, and so for the local committee, we would want Ayer and Devens residents. And then, of course, like I stated, for the bigger committee, the jurisdictional committee, they are a stakeholder. They weren't a stakeholder, and they were made into a stakeholder. When the Devens Jurisdictional Framework Committee formed,
Right.
it was then voted on to make them the sixth stakeholder. So for those who remember the past, think of it as JBOS 2.0, okay? All great ideas as to where we're going to be or hope to be in 2033. So I'm hoping that we're popping the champagne.
All right, okay, all right. And
That everything has come through, everybody's happy, and the state's looked at our report, and whatever it is that has been sent to them saying this is what we want, we're all popping the champagne saying we did it, and I
Nice.
think we can do it. We just gotta sit down, throw away the old stuff, and look new.
excellent.
Looks good.
So I've got actually just one more, as I get a few more minutes, I see. So I sort of asked you all the long view question, meaning where you'd like to see us, or where you think we should be on the eve of 2033. So I'll come from the other perspective. I should have done this maybe first, but with all of that said, from your point, what do you think our next step should be? In other words, how do we not just keep the energy going, keep these conversations going, get this, formulated, and I'm talking in, conceptual terms, but what would be your advice for a next step? So after this symposium ends tomorrow, we don't want it to just end and, we talked about things. What should be our next step? I mean, we talked about this local effort and a committee. What for the town, what would be another maybe first step?
I would love to see a wish list of maybe 5 to 10 items. Not at this point, not analyzed to the point where we could say it's doable or not. Not yet. That's premature. That's premature. But just to say, what is our playing field, and just define that, and have that list of saying these are the things that are. At least we can go and say these are the things after deliberation we arrived at are the issues on the table, and that now we can move forward and with the analysis, the cost benefit, all the subcommittees and committees, and the public outreach. But now it's built around something. And
Okay.
we start with that list.
All right, so a wish list as a sort of a next step, or one of the
Yes.
next steps, a list. Any other next step thoughts in addition to that?
I think keep having meetings.
Okay,
Usually meetings, I've been on a lot of committees where everybody gets gung ho and
Yeah.
then they walk out of the room and that's it, never hear about it again.
right.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Not, you don't want to have too many meetings that people get sick of it, but if you have enough symposiums, maybe twice a year.
sure.
every year.
I think it ties into what we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, to even some of our existing boards and committees, when possible, fitting in a little bit of time on a topic or so forth. Any other next step or suggested?
I'd like to try and use the momentum of the symposium to actually get the local committee going. So as a member of the select board, I was designated as the select board member on that committee. I'll still do it, yes. And actually, I really do want to do it.
Yes.
The work I did on Vicksburg Square years ago really piqued my interest, realizing how much of a generational impact this decision is going to have on our entire region. But yeah, if we can use the momentum, get some good people together. We tried doing that just before COVID, but then COVID hit and everything kind of fell by the wayside. Just at least start the process, get people together, get some wish lists put together, start figuring out what we need to look at, what people are looking for information, and just kind of use that as a springboard to start a normal process to be looking at Devens over the next 5-10 years.
Excellent. Janice, the next step?
He stole my thunder.
All right, okay, yeah.
You're welcome.
All right, yeah.
No, he's right. I mean, what I'm hoping for at the end of this symposium is that people are going to start signing on to the committee. I know that there are some people that they're, like it's been said, they're like, well, I don't want to sign on a committee. Well, first of all, this committee is being formed, so the meeting schedule hasn't been set yet. So you kind of need to join it and then find out a meeting schedule.
Right.
Now, it's not gonna be weekly, that's for sure, okay? It may be toward the end, you know,
Yeah.
8 years from now it might be, but right now, I don't think so. So I want everyone to just kinda, I'm hoping, is just kinda, just throw that out, okay? Just throw that out and sign on. Sign on to be interested, okay? Get it started. Help us get the ball rolling, okay? A year from now, your life's changed. Well, okay, you're stepping away, somebody else is stepping in. But get this momentum going. We need you, okay? And we need the young people, okay? And that includes even a 10-year-old. You know, because that 10-year-old is gonna see something that none of us saw, that may or may not be feasible, but will spark something that causes another conversation like, oh, wait a minute, you said that, and that made me think of this, and we forgot to talk about that. So that 10-year-old needs to know that their input is needed, okay? Because this is a big process.
Yes.
And though it can sound like, oh, there's gonna be too many voices, yes, that sounds like a lot, but I think you're gonna find it'll lead right into a nice committee that'll be able to do this
Yeah.
and keep the enthusiasm up, you know?
And there's free champagne.
Yeah.
Free champagne at the end.
All right.
I'll bring the case. 2033, I'll bring the case of champagne.
So with that, I want to thank all of you, Janice, Scott, Nick, Jonathan, for all of your time this afternoon. Let's do this again in the near future. Have another
I think we should.
roundtable discussion. A lot of good points brought up. I want to thank all of you. I also want to thank all of you for your leadership on your respective boards and roles for the town of Ayer. For folks that are watching, tomorrow at the town hall at 10 a.m. Will be the Citizen Design Charrette, which should be an exciting activity where folks will also be able to draw and discuss their visions for some of these issues. Also, for interested individuals that are watching, if you'd like to get more information or involved on whether the local committee or on just aspects of Devens, please feel free to contact either the select board's office or come to a planning board meeting or a board of assessors meeting or a select board meeting. Reach out to us and we'll continue to reach out to you. So with that, thank you all. I appreciate it. And
Thank you.
everyone have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.